Under the silent canopy of stars, the night stretches wide and endless. The air feels softer now, carrying the faint hum of the distant world below and the echo of something older, something that has always been there, waiting. As you settle into stillness, your breathing slows, each inhale deepening the sense of calm, each exhale drawing you further away from the noise of day. The story begins not in a single place, but in the quiet space between thought and dream. This is where wonder lives. This is where the unknown begins to whisper. The narrator's voice drifts like a low tide, gentle but certain. It speaks of how night has always held a dual nature, both comfort and curiosity. For as long as there have been eyes to see, humans have looked upward, tracing the glimmer of constellations and feeling, somewhere deep inside, that the stars were watching back. The ancients believed the sky was a living map, a great, breathing canvas marked with stories of gods, heroes, and celestial messengers. The same light that now spills across your window once shone over travelers in deserts, sailors lost at sea, and dreamers lying awake, asking the same unanswerable question: are we alone? There is an ancient rhythm to this question, as old as the pulse of the earth itself. Thousands of years before telescopes or satellites, early humans painted their questions into stone. In the caves of Lascaux, spirals and stars are etched beside the figures of hunters, as though early man wanted to bind his life to the sky's eternal glow. In the sands of Egypt, temple ceilings were carved with maps of the heavens, charts of Sirius, Orion, and the unseen paths of the planets. The Dogon people of Mali, long before modern astronomy, spoke of Sirius B, a companion star invisible to the naked eye. Scholars still debate how they knew of its existence. Was it ancestral knowledge, intuition, or something else entirely? As the narrator speaks, the tone is unhurried, almost hypnotic. The soundscape beneath is soft and distant, a wind that could be desert air, a faint hum like electricity or ocean waves, the pulse of something cosmic yet familiar. The story suggests that the stars have always been our first mystery, the original frontier that pulled the human spirit upward. When ancient priests tracked celestial movements, they did not see cold orbs of gas and stone. They saw watchers, travelers, perhaps even kin. The Babylonians read omens from the alignment of planets. The Mayans built temples that aligned perfectly with solstice light, and the Sumerians spoke of beings who descended from the heavens bringing wisdom and tools of creation. History records these as myths, but myths often bloom from seeds of truth. There is comfort in this continuity, knowing that across thousands of years, under countless skies, people have shared the same longing. The night sky connects every civilization, every dreamer, every soul who has ever paused to wonder what lies beyond the faint shimmer of atmosphere. The narrator reflects on this shared humanity, describing the stars as mirrors that show us not only the universe's vastness but our own reflection in it. The listener is invited to close their eyes and imagine lying beneath the same stars that watched the first fires burn, the same constellations that guided explorers and inspired poets. The pacing is slow and deliberate, almost like a lullaby woven with history. The narrator's tone balances curiosity with serenity, assuring the listener that mystery is not to be feared. It is a gentle reminder of how small we are, and yet how infinite our thoughts can be. Each word feels like a breath. Each sentence folds softly into the next. The story does not demand belief or disbelief. It invites both science and spirit to rest together in quiet awe. As this opening chapter unfolds, the listener begins to drift, not just toward sleep, but into the story itself. The veil between fact and dream thins. The narrator speaks of how ancient astronomers saw movement among the stars that did not belong to planets or comets, wandering lights that darted, hovered, then vanished. To them, it was divine. To us, it might be the first record of something unearthly. The whisper of mystery grows louder, but still remains calm, unthreatening. It suggests that maybe, through all ages, we have been watched, not as subjects, but as companions on a long cosmic path. As your breathing steadies and your eyes grow heavier, the story pauses at the edge of a deeper question. It lingers in the quiet, where stars seem to pulse in rhythm with your heart. Perhaps, the narrator says softly, what we call the unknown has always been here, just waiting for us to slow down enough to feel it. And with that thought, the scene fades gently into darkness, an ending that is also a beginning, a doorway opening toward the ancient sky where the first mysteries were born. The night deepens, carrying the listener further back, beyond the reach of memory, beyond recorded time, into an age when the boundaries between heaven and earth were not yet drawn. In this gentle darkness, the story unfolds, revealing that humanity's relationship with the stars did not begin with curiosity alone. It began with reverence. To our ancestors, the sky was not empty, it was inhabited. Each light that shimmered above seemed to move with intention, to breathe with purpose. The narrator's tone remains soft, like a voice traveling through fog, recounting how the first humans to lift their gaze saw the heavens not as distant, but as alive. Long before telescopes and modern science, the ancients were chroniclers of celestial patterns. In Mesopotamia, clay tablets dating back over 4,000 years recorded movements of mysterious skyboats and fiery spheres that lingered among the constellations. The Sumerians believed in the Anunnaki, divine beings said to have descended from the stars to shape humanity. Their myths spoke of luminous figures who brought knowledge of agriculture, mathematics, and architecture. Mainstream historians read these as symbolic tales of cultural evolution. Yet others, particularly in the field of comparative mythology, have noted the strange consistency between Sumerian tales and later legends from other lands, stories of gods descending from the sky, always in radiant chariots of fire. The narrative drifts gently from Mesopotamia to the banks of the Nile, where the Egyptian night sky shimmered with meaning. The pyramids themselves were aligned precisely with Orion's belt, and the star Sirius held such importance that its heliacal rising marked the beginning of the Egyptian New Year. Ancient priests called Sirius Soptit, the bringer of life, for its appearance foretold the flooding of the Nile. Yet among the hieroglyphs and texts of the Pyramid Age are depictions of winged discs and luminous beings descending from above. To the Egyptians, these were gods, manifestations of Ra or Horus, messengers between realms. Modern researchers see something else, perhaps echoes of encounters that transcended myth. The narrator's voice remains measured, never rushing to claim, only to invite wonder. What if, the voice muses softly, what we now call myth was, in its time, simply the language available to describe the impossible? The story then carries the listener eastward, to the ancient texts of India. In the Vedas and the Mahabharata, centuries before the Common Era, there are descriptions of flying machines known as vimanas, craft capable of traversing the heavens, sometimes engaging in fiery battles. The details are strikingly technological, references to mercury propulsion, noise, light, and tremendous speed. For scholars of religion, these were poetic metaphors for divine power. For those drawn to the extraterrestrial hypothesis, they are blueprints of ancient flight. Softly, the story reminds the listener that similar accounts appear across the ancient world. In the Hebrew scriptures, the prophet Ezekiel described a wheel within a wheel, burning like polished metal, descending from the sky. The voice recounts his vision slowly, the cadence soothing even as the imagery glows vivid in the mind. Rotating rings, eyes all around, thunderous sound, and radiant light. Historians have long debated this passage. Some interpret it as a symbolic revelation, others as an extraordinary attempt to describe advanced technology using the language of the time. The calm narration leaves the question open, allowing the listener's imagination to rest in that gray space between faith and science. The Romans, too, recorded strange visitations. The historian Livy noted sightings of phantom ships gleaming in the sky, while Pliny the Elder wrote of shields of flame that hovered over cities. These accounts, preserved in official records rather than legend, suggest that the phenomenon has shadowed human civilization since its dawn. The narrator connects these threads delicately, noting that across continents and centuries, from Asia to the Americas, from the gods of Olympus to the feathered serpents of Mesoamerica, the motif is constant. Luminous visitors descending from above, imparting wisdom or warning. As the story continues, the tone deepens into reflective calm. The narrator observes that while modern eyes seek evidence, photographs, radar, data, the ancients sought meaning. To them, the unknown was sacred. The stars were not objects to be measured but presences to be revered. Perhaps, the narrator suggests, in our pursuit of proof, we have lost a certain quiet sensitivity that once allowed people to feel connected to the cosmos. The listener is invited to consider that ancient accounts, though shrouded in symbolism, may carry truths deeper than literal description, truths about the timeless human encounter with the mysterious. The background sound is faint but immersive, a low hum of wind through stone corridors, the distant call of an unseen desert night. The story moves to the Americas, where ancient cultures also looked skyward with awe. The Nazca lines in Peru, vast figures etched into the desert floor, depict hummingbirds, monkeys, and what some have interpreted as beings in helmets or suits. The narrator describes them not as evidence, but as a mystery worthy of contemplation. Gigantic geoglyphs visible only from the air, made by a people without flight. In Central America, the Maya and Aztec built temples that aligned with celestial cycles so precise that modern astronomers still marvel. Their gods came from the sky and promised return from the same direction. The narrative folds these cultures together, not as proof of visitation but as a chorus of shared vision. Every civilization, isolated by oceans and millennia, told the same story in its own tongue. If humanity dreamed this into being, the narrator says softly, then it is a dream that all humanity shares. Perhaps, the story suggests, we have always carried the sense of other presences in our collective mind, reflections of the vast intelligence that watches quietly from the stars. As the section draws to a close, the story's tone grows more introspective. The narrator speaks of how myth and memory often intertwine, how the subconscious records impressions that reason cannot explain. It reflects on the possibility that ancient eyes may have witnessed what we now call unidentified aerial phenomena, describing them with the vocabulary of gods and miracles. Or perhaps, the narrator whispers, they were glimpsing something internal, a projection of human yearning, an echo of our own cosmic origins. The listener is left in a state of tranquil curiosity. The story slows, the imagery dissolving into gentle starlight. The voice concludes softly, long before our instruments scan the heavens, our ancestors already knew the sky was alive. They saw movement among the stars, patterns too deliberate to ignore. Whether gods, travelers, or dreams, they became part of us, woven into our myths, carried forward in our blood. The final words linger like stardust, and so, when you look upward tonight, you are not the first to wonder, nor will you be the last. For the stars remember, even when we forget. The scene fades with a calm swell of sound, leading the listener effortlessly toward the next chapter, when wonder will give way to the first modern flickers of fear, and the mysteries of the sky will meet the cold light of history. The air changes as the story moves forward in time. The warmth of myth gives way to the cool precision of modern history. It is the 20th century now, an era of engines, radar screens, and fear suspended in the thin air between nations. The narrator's voice remains soft, but the tone carries a quiet gravity, as if the world itself has grown louder, more complicated. Humanity has taken flight. The sky, once the realm of gods, has become a theater of war and discovery. And yet, in this age of machines, something strange begins to happen. Lights that do not belong, objects that defy the laws of motion, mysteries returning to the skies we thought we had conquered. The story begins with the Second World War, when the night was filled not with stars but with fire. Pilots flying over Europe and the Pacific reported glowing orbs that followed their aircraft, darting through clouds with impossible agility. They called them Foo Fighters, a term half in jest, half in fear. These lights appeared on radar, sometimes in groups, sometimes alone, moving faster than any known plane. Both Allied and Axis pilots saw them. Each side assumed they were secret weapons of the other. When the war ended and the sightings continued, the explanation dissolved into mystery. Historians would later debate their nature: ball lightning, atmospheric plasma, optical illusion, but the reports remain among the first verified modern encounters with the unexplained. The narrator's tone is calm but investigative, guiding the listener through the slow awakening of official curiosity. As the world rebuilt from the ruins of war, another kind of tension began: the Cold War, a contest not just of power, but of information. The night sky, now filled with experimental aircraft and early rockets, became both a source of fear and fascination. In this uneasy atmosphere, 1947 marked the turning point. The narrator speaks the name softly, almost reverently: Roswell. The story unfolds like a lullaby wrapped around a mystery. In July of that year, a rancher named Mac Brazel discovered strange debris scattered across his land near Roswell, New Mexico, metallic fragments, thin yet resilient, that crumpled and then returned to shape. The military first announced the recovery of a flying disc, then retracted the statement within 24 hours, claiming it had been a weather balloon. That single retraction ignited a wildfire of speculation that has burned for decades. The narrator does not sensationalize. Instead, the story is told like a dream being carefully unwrapped. Officially, historians attribute the incident to Project Mogul, a top-secret program involving high-altitude balloons designed to detect Soviet nuclear tests. Documents declassified decades later seemed to support that explanation. But eyewitnesses told a different story. Civilians who saw the wreckage described symbols etched into metal, unearthly materials that resisted fire and fracture. Some military personnel later spoke of recovered bodies, small and frail, hurriedly taken away under guard. These accounts, the narrator explains gently, remain unverified but enduring. Perhaps they are misunderstandings, or perhaps they are the first modern whispers of something our ancestors had already seen and forgotten. The pacing slows, inviting reflection rather than judgment. The narrator describes how Roswell changed the collective imagination. Newspapers began printing terms like flying saucer. Radio broadcasts filled the air with debate and disbelief. For the first time, the unknown was not a distant myth. It was a headline. And with that came a subtle shift in human psychology. The unknown was no longer divine. It was technological. The gods had become possible visitors from other worlds, and the sky once again became a place of questions. The story lingers in that moment of transition. It reflects on how fear and wonder coexist, how mystery often blooms in the cracks of uncertainty. The narrator draws a connection between technological advancement and the resurgence of sky phenomena. Perhaps, the voice muses, the more we reach upward, the more the sky responds. As nations tested nuclear weapons and radar blanketed the atmosphere, sightings multiplied. From 1947 to the early 1950s, hundreds of reports flooded military channels. Bright discs, cigar-shaped craft, lights that outpaced jets and vanished without trace. The U.S. government began formal investigations, though quietly. The narrator's voice grows slightly lower, its cadence slower, describing how Project Sign was formed in 1948, followed by Project Grudge and later Project Blue Book. These were not fringe efforts. They were official, staffed by Air Force officers and scientists. Early reports considered extraterrestrial hypotheses seriously, but as public panic grew, the tone shifted toward dismissal. The narrator recounts this not as conspiracy, but as human caution, governments wary of hysteria in a world already divided by atomic fear. Meanwhile, across the ocean, other nations faced the same enigma. In the Soviet Union, radar operators reported formations of objects moving with precision that defied known aircraft. In France, Italy, and Britain, Airbases logged sightings of flying cigars and metallic discs. Each government investigated, and each concluded with uncertainty. The listener can feel the subtle unease beneath the calm narration, the sense that something was watching humanity's technological ascent with quiet interest. As the story continues, the narrator softens the tone again, weaving introspection into history. The late 1940s and early 1950s were years of contradiction, scientific triumph paired with existential dread. The same skies that carried humanity's first rockets toward space also carried rumors of intruders from beyond. Psychologists would later argue that UFOs mirrored our cultural fears, symbols of invasion, atomic annihilation, and loss of control. Yet the consistency of sightings by credible witnesses, pilots, radar operators, and military personnel suggests something more persistent, something not easily explained away by stress or illusion. The background soundscape returns, low wind, faint static, the soft mechanical hum of distant engines. The narrator reflects on how these decades marked the transformation of mystery into movement. What had once been myth now entered the language of science and secrecy. Roswell became legend, but also precedent. Government reports turned into folklore. And through it all, humanity continued to look up, torn between fear and fascination, skepticism and belief. The story closes this section on a gentle, reflective note. It was an age of awakening, the narrator whispers, when humanity, newly armed with flight, began to realize that the sky was far from empty. The old gods were gone, but their replacements, those elusive lights, those silent watchers, had taken their place. The music fades to near silence. And so the question returned, modernized but unchanged. If they are not gods and not us, then who or what are they? The section ends in stillness, the listener suspended between the comfort of history and the slow return of unease. The calm voice lingers a moment longer. Soon, the stories would no longer belong only to soldiers and pilots. Soon, ordinary people would begin to speak of lights outside their windows, of visitors who came not from legend, but from the quiet corners of the night. The sound fades to darkness, leading softly into the next chapter, where the watchers descend closer and humanity's dreams begin to take form. The world has entered a quieter, more intimate darkness. The skies that once belonged to soldiers and scientists now hang over ordinary homes and lonely highways. The narrator's voice lowers to a gentle whisper, the tone shifting from historical to personal, from the vastness of space to the fragile boundaries of the human mind. This section unfolds like a dream remembered at the edge of waking, vivid, strange, half-believed. It is the era of encounters, when the mystery of the unknown no longer hovers above the clouds but reaches down into bedrooms, forests, and fragile human lives. The story begins with a soft retelling of one of the most famous modern accounts, the abduction of Betty and Barney Hill in 1961. The narrator takes care not to sensationalize, describing the couple with empathy and restraint. They were an ordinary pair, a postal worker and a social worker, driving home through the mountains of New Hampshire late one September night. The road was empty, the world asleep. Then came the lights, distant at first, then closer, following them through the dark. The voice of the narrator slows, describing the quiet hum in the air, the strange sense of time stretching, the sudden blank in memory. When the couple returned home, hours were missing. They could not explain why their watches had stopped, or why they felt uneasy and disoriented. Months later, under hypnosis, both described being taken aboard a craft by small beings with large heads and dark eyes. Their accounts matched in remarkable detail: the light, the corridor, the cold metallic air. To some, their story marked the birth of the abduction phenomenon. To others, it was the product of suggestion, stress, or the era's growing fascination with space. Psychologists who studied the case noted elements of trauma, but also sincerity. Betty and Barney Hill did not seek fame. They sought understanding. Their experience, however interpreted, became the first in a long line of midnight confessions whispered into the public consciousness. The narration drifts gently into the 1970s, another era of uncertainty and wonder. The soft sound of forest wind fades in, a subtle transition into the American Southwest, where another encounter would etch itself into folklore. In 1975, a group of loggers working in the mountains of Arizona witnessed a glowing object hovering above the trees. One of them, a young man named Travis Walton, approached the light. A flash, then silence. He vanished for 5 days. The calm voice of the narrator recounts this event without drama, emphasizing the eerie stillness of those days, the search parties, the disbelief, the confusion. When Walton returned, he spoke of waking inside a bright, metallic room surrounded by strange beings. His account, tested and retested, remains one of the most examined in history. Skeptics argued fabrication. Supporters pointed to polygraph results and the unwavering consistency of his story. Yet the narrator maintains neutrality, inviting the listener not to decide, but to drift between possibilities. Perhaps it happened exactly as told. Perhaps it was a manifestation of the deep human need to find meaning in the incomprehensible. Even dreams, the narrator says softly, leave fingerprints on the waking mind. The story moves onward, crossing the ocean to the cold forests of Suffolk, England, where in 1980 the stillness of night was broken by lights near RAF Woodbridge. Air Force personnel stationed there investigated, expecting a downed aircraft. Instead, they found glowing shapes moving between trees, illuminating the forest floor. Their commander recorded the event in real time, his calm military voice describing movements, shadows, and radiation readings. Known today as the Rendlesham Forest Incident, it stands as one of the most documented UFO encounters in modern history. The narrator paints the scene slowly, mist curling around trunks, lights flickering silently through the fog, trained men reduced to whispers. What unites these stories, the narrator observes, is not proof but emotion, the deep sincerity of those who experienced something they could not explain. In each case, there is fear, confusion, wonder, and an enduring need to tell the story. Psychologists studying abduction phenomena note recurring elements: paralysis, bright light, the sensation of floating, and lost time. These could be signs of sleep paralysis, a neurological event where consciousness wakes before the body does, blending dreams with waking reality. And yet, as the narrator says gently, the consistency across decades and cultures suggests something more than mere illusion. When so many dream the same dream, the voice murmurs, it may no longer be a dream at all. It may be a language we do not yet understand. The story shifts subtly from case studies to human reflection. The narrator speaks about the psychology of encounter, the fragile line between perception and belief. Researchers in the 1980s and 1990s found that many abductees shared patterns of deep empathy, vivid imagination, and sometimes a history of trauma. Their experiences, whether external or internal, often brought both suffering and transformation. Some reported lifelong insomnia, others newfound spirituality. The experience of contact, real or imagined, changed lives as profoundly as any verified event could. The tone remains compassionate, not skeptical, treating each account as a story of human vulnerability before the vastness of the unknown. The listener is invited to imagine what it might feel like, to wake beneath unfamiliar stars, to hear a low hum beyond the edge of hearing, to realize that the boundaries of the known world are not as solid as they seemed. The narration slows, guiding the listener's breath into rhythm with the calm of the scene. Sometimes, the voice whispers, the universe does not visit us in the sky above, but in the space between heartbeats, in the silence where our minds reach outward for understanding. In the final part of the section, the story draws the pattern together. Across continents, the reports continue. Farmers in Argentina, children in Zimbabwe, pilots over the Pacific. Lights, figures, whispers. Always similar, always uncertain. Scientists call them psychological constructs, Believers call them visitations. The narrator concludes this passage with quiet balance. Perhaps these stories are neither entirely true nor entirely false. Perhaps they exist in that space where human consciousness touches something beyond itself, where dreams and reality blur into one another, and mystery becomes a mirror. The music beneath grows softer, a single sustained tone like distant wind. The narrator speaks one last time before the section fades. From the hills of New England to the forests of England, from deserts to oceans, the watchers have drawn closer. And whether they are travelers from the stars or projections of our own deep yearning, they remind us that the unknown is not far away. It lives just beyond the threshold of sleep. The sound of the wind lingers for a moment, then dissolves into stillness. The listener, caught between curiosity and calm, feels the presence of something vast and ungraspable. The story pauses here, not to conclude, but to prepare for the next voice in the chain of mystery, the one that speaks from behind closed doors, through official reports, black ink, and deliberate silence. The story shifts now into the realm of silence, the kind that hums beneath the surface of official statements, the kind that fills the gap between what is said and what is known. The narrator's voice remains gentle but takes on a new weight, like the calm before revelation. The age of mystery has entered the halls of power. Governments, scientists, and military institutions have begun to take notice of the unexplained, though not always with the transparency the public might hope for. This is the age of secrecy, the quiet machinery of investigation and denial, of files locked away and answers spoken only in fragments. The narration begins in the late 1940s, where we last left the story, a world anxious and rebuilding. In the United States, reports of unidentified flying objects multiplied. Civilians, pilots, and even radar operators described lights darting through the sky, objects moving faster than any known aircraft. Faced with growing public concern, the U.S. Air Force initiated Project Sign in 1948. Its purpose, officially, was to determine whether these objects posed a threat to national security. The narrator's tone is calm, measured, but carries a sense of quiet irony. The first internal memo of Project Sign concluded that the phenomenon was real and possibly of interplanetary origin. But as the Cold War deepened, so did caution. Within a year, the project's conclusions were rewritten under a new name, Project Grudge. The new directive emphasized skepticism, suggesting that witnesses were misinterpreting ordinary phenomena. The voice lingers on this contradiction, the rhythm slow, almost hypnotic. The closer one looks at official history, the narrator says softly, the more it resembles the night sky itself, some stars shining brightly, others carefully hidden behind clouds. In 1952, after hundreds more sightings, Project Blue Book replaced Grudge. Its mission was long and methodical: gather every report, investigate, and close each case with an explanation whenever possible. Over 17 years, the project analyzed more than 12,000 incidents. Most were attributed to weather balloons, atmospheric anomalies, or misidentified aircraft. But over 700 cases remained unresolved, the ones that moved without sound, changed direction instantly, or appeared on radar where nothing should have been. The narration stays calm but persistent, weaving in details like soft threads of a larger fabric. The Condon Report of 1968, sponsored by the University of Colorado, was meant to end public fascination once and for all. Its conclusion declared that UFOs posed no threat and held no scientific value. Yet within the same document were multiple unexplained cases that defied natural explanation. When Project Blue Book was officially shut down in 1969, the message to the public was clear: there was nothing more to see. And yet, people kept seeing. The story widens its scope, crossing borders and decades. Governments around the world followed similar patterns: interest, investigation, denial. In the Soviet Union, Setka and gathered classified UFO data throughout the 1970s. France's space agency, NIS, quietly launched JEPEN in 1977 to study aerial phenomena. The narrator describes how British, Canadian, and Brazilian defense departments all maintained secret archives of their own, often released only decades later. Each country's story followed the same rhythm: an encounter, a file, a silence. The narrator pauses, letting the silence settle before continuing. The background sound shifts subtly, a faint hum like radio static, the ghost of intercepted transmissions. The voice grows more intimate. It is possible, the narrator whispers, that the greatest mystery of all is not what has been seen, but what has been hidden. The story turns to the darker side of secrecy, the documents redacted beyond recognition, the testimonies dismissed as unreliable, the quiet discouragement of those who asked too many questions. In the 1950s, the CIA convened the Robertson Panel, concerned that UFO hysteria might overwhelm radar defense systems. Its recommendation was not to uncover the truth but to debunk the phenomenon publicly. The narrator explains this with gentle neutrality, leaving judgment to the listener. Sometimes, the voice reflects, truth is not denied because it is dangerous, but because it is inconvenient. The timeline flows into the present, the narration soft yet precise. The 21st century brings a new tone of cautious acknowledgement. In 2007, hidden within the U.S. Department of Defense, a program quietly began, ADIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. It studied videos and data from military encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena. These records, long buried in classified vaults, surfaced publicly in 2017 through leaked footage published by the New York Times. The videos, known as Gimbal, Go Fast, and Tic Tac, showed Navy pilots tracking craft that moved with impossible acceleration and emitted no visible propulsion. The narrator's tone here is calm and factual, careful not to sensationalize. The pilots' voices, it says softly, carry no hysteria, only astonishment, the sound of professionals facing something that defies their training. Following those revelations, the Pentagon confirmed that the objects in the videos were indeed unidentified. For the first time in decades, officials spoke the words again: unidentified aerial phenomena. The narrator notes how this small shift in language marked a cultural and scientific change. Governments that once dismissed sightings as fantasy began to admit, however cautiously, that something was present in our skies beyond understanding. The narration remains deeply soothing even as it explores the edges of revelation. It reminds the listener that secrecy and silence do not always mean deception. Sometimes they mean uncertainty. Perhaps, the narrator muses, it was not fear of panic that silenced the truth, but fear of ignorance. To admit that something unknown moves above us is to confess how little control we truly have. The story drifts into reflection, connecting the human desire for answers with the institutional need for order. The narrator describes the psychological tension in official secrecy, a desire to protect, to contain mystery within the language of bureaucracy. Each report, each investigation, was an attempt to translate wonder into paperwork, to make the unexplainable measurable. Yet the unknown resists measurement. It slips through radar and rhetoric alike. The soundscape deepens, a low, steady tone, like the pulse of hidden machinery. The narrator speaks again, softly but with quiet conviction. The documents may be classified, but the sky is not. Every night, it remains open to those who dare to look. The words settle like dust. Governments may hide data, but the stars, indifferent and eternal, continue to shine freely over all. The section closes gently, the tone returning to stillness. The narrator invites the listener to imagine rows of filing cabinets in dimly lit rooms, drawers filled with reports marked unknown. The papers yellow with age, but their contents remain unresolved. Somewhere, perhaps, a radar technician or a pilot still remembers the night they saw something that should not have been there, a memory sealed beneath layers of silence. As the final lines unfold, the voice grows softer still. There are things known, and things hidden. Between them lies the unspoken agreement of power, that mystery must sometimes be managed. Yet even silence cannot erase what the sky remembers. The music fades into a low, resonant hum, not ominous, but contemplative. The listener is left with a sense of vast secrecy, not threatening but solemn, like a locked door beneath the stars. The narrator breathes one final line before the transition. Beyond the walls of secrecy, others have begun to search not for evidence of craft, but for meaning, to ask whether these visitors are not only from the stars, but from somewhere far stranger. And with that, the darkness deepens, preparing for the next movement, where science, philosophy, and the boundaries of consciousness will blur, and the phenomenon will shift from machines in the sky to mirrors in the mind. The tone of the story begins to change now, not toward revelation, but reflection. The narrator's voice grows even calmer, drawing the listener deeper into the intersection between belief, perception, and the unknown. The story moves beyond the realm of government files and official reports into a quieter, more personal territory, the space where science meets spirituality and reality begins to feel porous. It is here, in this liminal space between waking and dreaming, that the phenomenon becomes not just an object in the sky, but a mirror of the human mind. The narrator begins by softly introducing a truth that researchers, psychologists, and philosophers have all grappled with, that experiences of the unknown, alien encounters, ghostly visions, unexplainable lights, are deeply shaped by human perception. From the 1950s onward, while governments investigated hardware and radar traces, a different kind of research quietly emerged, focused on the witnesses themselves. Psychologists like Carl Jung proposed that UFOs could be modern myths, projections of a collective unconscious searching for meaning in an increasingly mechanical world. His 1958 work, Flying Saucers, a modern myth of things seen in the skies, suggested that what people saw might not only exist in the sky, but within the psyche, symbols of transformation, unity, and fear of the unknown. The voice remains soothing and contemplative as it explains Jung's view, not as a dismissal, but as a deepening. Perhaps, the narrator says, the sky has always been our canvas for the soul's imagination. When we see something beyond explanation, it may be both external and internal, a reflection of what we long for or what we fear most. The music beneath is gentle, a slow pulse of ambient tones that seem to breathe in rhythm with the narration. But belief cannot be confined to psychology alone. The story gently expands its focus to the realm of the metaphysical, to those who believe the visitors are not from another planet, but from another dimension. The narrator recalls the work of researchers like Jacques Vallée, who argued that UFO phenomena often resemble age-old folklore, encounters with fairies, angels, or spirits dressed in modern language. Vallée observed patterns, glowing lights, missing time, altered states of consciousness, that repeated across centuries, regardless of culture or technology. What if, the narrator whispers, the beings we now call extraterrestrial have always been with us, changing form to match our understanding? The narration does not insist, it suggests. It weaves possibilities like threads in a dream. For those who have experienced contact, the question is not just what they saw, but why they were chosen to see it. In the quiet dark, the narrator explores how many encounters carry a personal, almost spiritual dimension. Witnesses describe sensations of warmth, telepathic communication, or profound calm, feelings that mirror ancient accounts of divine visitation. Scientists speak of altered states, the brain responding to electromagnetic stress or sleep paralysis. Mystics speak of thin places between worlds, where reality folds. Both may be true, the voice muses in their own ways. The story drifts through accounts of contactees in the 1950s and 60s, George Adamski, Howard Menger, and others, who claimed to have met benevolent beings from Venus or beyond. Their stories, often dismissed as fantasy, carried messages not of invasion but of peace, warning humanity of war and ecological ruin. Even if their tales were dreams, the narrator says softly, their warnings were real. Over time, the contactee movement evolved into something more complex. Abduction narratives marked by fear, missing time, and physical evidence. Yet even here, amid trauma and terror, a strange thread of transcendence persisted. Many abductees later described feelings of expanded awareness, of glimpsing a reality where time and matter no longer behaved as they should. The narrator allows space for silence here, the soundscape thinning until only the faint hum of wind remains. Perhaps, the voice continues, the phenomenon is not visiting us, but revealing us, showing the mind its own depths, the spirit its own vastness. This reflection is delivered not as speculation, but as a kind of meditation. The unknown becomes a mirror, not a monster. Then, softly, the story turns towards science again, toward the emerging fields that blur the boundary between physics and philosophy. Quantum theory, multiverse hypotheses, and the study of consciousness all hint that reality may be far less solid than once believed. The narrator speaks of physicists who propose that our universe may be just one among many, each vibrating at different frequencies, sometimes intersecting, a scientific echo of the old mystical idea of thin places. Could UFOs, then, be visitors not from distant stars, but from neighboring realities? The narration never rushes. Each idea unfolds like a slow tide, inviting wonder rather than conviction. The narrator describes how some modern researchers, from consciousness scientists like John Mack to physicists like Hal Puthoff, have proposed that encounters with the unknown may involve altered states that temporarily tune the mind to other dimensions. In these moments, what we see might not be arriving from somewhere else, but emerging from the fabric of reality itself. Perhaps, the narrator breathes, we are the threshold, and the phenomenon is what happens when the boundary of perception dissolves. The tone becomes more intimate, as if the listener is being guided inward rather than outward. The story draws parallels between alien contact and other transcendent experiences, near-death visions, out-of-body journeys, moments of profound intuition. Each reflects a reality beyond language, glimpsed but never captured. If all human experience is a form of translation, the narrator suggests gently, then the phenomenon may be the language of the unknown, spoken through symbols our minds can barely comprehend. There is a long pause, just enough for the listener to breathe deeply. The narrator's voice lowers to a near whisper. Every culture has described this presence, it says, from the shamans of Siberia to the mystics of Tibet. Some call them star people, others ancestors or watchers or guides. Perhaps they are all the same, viewed through different dreams. The background sound deepens, soft chimes, like echoes of distant bells carried by wind. And yet, even amid such ideas, the narrator never loses its calm rationality. It acknowledges how easily imagination and fear can shape memory. Psychologists studying abduction experiences have found patterns of sleep paralysis, lucid dreaming, and hypnagogic hallucinations, all phenomena capable of producing vivid sensations of presence and paralysis. The narrator explains this gently, not to discredit, but to comfort. The mind is a vast universe of its own, it says, and sometimes the stars we see are shining within us. The section closes with a synthesis, a peaceful merging of science and mystery. The voice speaks of how the phenomenon may be neither wholly external nor internal, but something in between, a dance between observer and observed. Perhaps, it says softly, we are both dreamers and dreamed, explorers and the explored. The soundscape shifts subtly, a low harmonic tone that seems to pulse like a heartbeat beneath the stars. As the listener drifts, the narrator concludes, the truth may not live in laboratories or legends, but in the quiet recognition that we are part of something vast, a consciousness as endless as the night sky. The visitors, the lights, the mysteries, they remind us of that infinity. And in that realization, fear dissolves, leaving only wonder. The voice fades into stillness. The last sound is a long, slow exhale, like the universe breathing. The story lingers on the edge of sleep, ready to pass into the next realm, where mystery becomes myth, and the echoes of the unknown ripple through the collective dreams of humanity. The story drifts now from the realm of secret documents and psychic mirrors into something even broader, the story of us. The narrator's tone remains calm and meditative, but there's a new current beneath it, a sense of awe at how deeply these mysteries have woven themselves into the collective imagination of humanity. What began as distant lights in the sky has become part of who we are, a language of wonder, fear, and curiosity that spans generations. This section is not about sightings or encounters, but about how the phenomenon has shaped the way we dream, create, and define our place in the cosmos. The voice begins softly, as if speaking across time. Every civilization, it says, has used the night sky as a canvas for its imagination. From myths of gods descending on golden chariots to the silver discs of the modern age, the pattern is clear. Whenever we reach upward, we bring our stories with us. The background sound grows warmer, with gentle notes like a lullaby played on ancient strings. The listener feels the world around them blur into the shared dream of history. The narrator takes us first to the early days of modern fascination, the mid-20th century, when UFOs became cultural icons. In the years following the Roswell incident and the first waves of sightings, art and media began to transform. Hollywood, always sensitive to the pulse of public fear and wonder, turned its lens skyward. Films like The Day the Earth Stood Still, 1951, and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977, did not merely entertain. They reflected the deep ambivalence of humanity, our fear of the unknown and our hope that intelligence beyond Earth might be wiser, gentler, more evolved than we are. These stories, the narrator murmurs, were lullabies for a frightened species. In the shadow of nuclear war, they whispered that perhaps the stars still cared. Through the decades, the narrative of alien life has mirrored human emotion. In the 1950s, visitors were invaders, metaphors for Cold War anxiety, for the unknown enemy that could arrive at any moment. In the 1970s, they became teachers and saviors, embodiments of enlightenment and peace. By the 1990s, as technology surged and faith waned, they reflected our inner fragmentation, gray beings with large, empty eyes, symbols of our own alienation in an age of machines. Each generation, the narrator says softly, saw itself reflected in the stars. The phenomenon became a mirror of our hopes and fears, evolving as we did. The voice then weaves in art, literature, and music, the way cosmic mystery has shaped creativity itself. The 1960s saw musicians like David Bowie and Sun Ra channel extraterrestrial imagery into art that questioned identity, freedom, and transcendence. Science fiction authors like Arthur C. Clarke, Carl Sagan, and Ursula Le Guin used the idea of alien intelligence to explore humanity's moral and philosophical limits. Even now, the narrator observes, our modern mythmakers, filmmakers, game designers, digital artists, continue to draw from the same eternal well, the yearning to connect with something greater than ourselves. Perhaps, the narrator muses, we are not waiting for contact, but remembering it, retelling an ancient story in new forms, century after century. The story turns next toward the social and spiritual side of the phenomenon. The narrator describes how, for some, belief in extraterrestrial intelligence has become more than curiosity, it has become faith. Across the world, communities and movements have emerged that blend cosmic mystery with spiritual seeking. Groups like the Raelians speak of human origins guided by beings from the stars. In New Age circles, the term starseed describes souls who believe they come from other worlds, reincarnated to help Earth evolve. The narrator speaks of these beliefs with gentleness, not judgment. Whether symbolic or literal, it says, they express a truth that lies deep in us all, the sense that we come from somewhere beyond, and that home is not just a place, but a feeling we are always trying to remember. The soundscape deepens with soft drones, the texture of deep space rendered in sound. The voice continues, weaving a portrait of how this fascination has reshaped culture, from architecture inspired by cosmic geometry to meditation practices that visualize starlight descending through the body. The mystery has not only lived in science or government corridors, it has entered the human soul. People have used it to explore meaning, to find calm in a vast universe, to connect their personal awakenings with something infinite. The cosmos, the narrator whispers, is no longer only above us. It has moved inside us, glowing in the quiet corners of our imagination. The narration shifts gently, exploring how the phenomenon has also united science and spirituality in unexpected ways. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, organizations like SETI continued to search the skies with radio telescopes, listening for signals. Yet, even as they listened outward, others began to listen inward. Neuroscientists studying consciousness, philosophers questioning the boundaries of perception. Popular culture began to mirror this fusion. Films like Interstellar and Arrival portrayed not alien invasion, but communication, empathy, and the transcendence of time. Slowly, the narrator notes, our stories began to change. The unknown was no longer the enemy. It was a teacher asking us to evolve. As the listener relaxes, the story flows into the present moment, a time when the line between science fiction and science fact grows ever thinner. The narrator describes how modern technology has made the universe more accessible than ever. We send probes to icy moons that may hold oceans beneath their crusts. Telescopes capture the light of galaxies billions of years old. Artificial intelligence deciphers radio patterns from the stars. And yet, even with all this progress, the central mystery remains untouched. Are we alone? The calm voice smiles through the words, almost playfully. Perhaps the answer was never meant to be found, but felt, in the quiet awe that keeps us looking. The story now turns inward again, reflecting on why this fascination endures. Psychologists and anthropologists have long noted that belief in the unknown serves a vital function. It gives shape to wonder, allowing us to explore our fears safely. Myths of gods, angels, and aliens are, in essence, the same story told in different ages, stories that remind us that we are part of something larger than the boundaries of Earth. When we look to the sky, the narrator says softly, we are really looking for connection, a confirmation that existence is shared, not solitary. The tone grows almost lullaby-like now, inviting the listener into stillness. The narrator reflects on how the phenomenon has also become a language of comfort, a bedtime mythology for a modern world that has lost its ancient gods but still yearns for meaning. In every culture, it says, people have dreamed of the heavens opening. Today, our gods arrive not on clouds, but in silver light. And though their names have changed, their purpose remains the same, to remind us that the universe is alive, watching, listening. In the closing minutes of this section, the music becomes softer, drifting like fog. The narrator's words slow, their rhythm matching the heartbeat of sleep. Perhaps that is why these stories endure, it whispers. They give us permission to wonder. They soothe our fear of emptiness by filling the dark with possibility. They tell us that in the vast night we are seen. There is a pause, a long, deep silence filled only by the sound of wind and the faint echo of distant chimes. Then, almost inaudibly, the voice concludes, the visitors may never land. The signals may never come. But as long as we gaze upward, the connection remains. The mystery is not out there. It is in the space between our hearts and the stars. The final note lingers, dissolving into stillness. The listener feels the vastness of the cosmos mirrored in their breath, the sense that even in our solitude, we are part of something infinite. The story prepares to move into its final chapters, where mystery becomes acceptance, and the question of the unknown transforms into a quiet understanding of what it means to dream, to search, and to belong beneath the eternal sky. The night begins to soften as the story turns inward, drifting from the vastness of cosmic speculation to the stillness of reflection. The narrator's voice, gentle and deliberate, speaks as though from within a dream. The further we reach into the stars, the more we realize we have never truly left them. Humanity's search for meaning, it suggests, has always been both scientific and spiritual, an endless dance between evidence and wonder. The voice recalls how every discovery, from ancient astronomers charting constellations to modern telescopes revealing distant exoplanets, deepens the mystery instead of solving it. Each answer only multiplies the questions, the narrator whispers. Perhaps this is the universe's way of keeping us awake to wonder. As soft tones echo beneath the voice, listeners are reminded that the stars they see are not strangers, but kin, their light traveling millions of years only to meet human eyes tonight. The section closes with a tender truth, that the real encounter may not be with something out there, but with something within. Maybe the visitors we seek are not travelers from beyond, the narrator muses, but reflections of consciousness, reminders that life, in all its forms, belongs to the same vast dream. The music fades, leaving the listener suspended between thought and peace, guided gently towards stillness. The story slows, becoming an echo of all that has been said, soft, reflective, eternal. The mystery does not end, the narrator begins. It only changes shape. The voice recalls humanity's timeless search for connection, from ancient myths to modern testimonies, suggesting that what people truly seek is not proof, but belonging. Each belief, whether in spirits, gods, or extraterrestrial life, emerges from the same impulse, to feel part of something larger. The unknown, the narrator explains, is not a void to fear, but a mirror reflecting the endless depth within us. Beneath the voice, a faint hum resonates, like a heartbeat shared between stars. As the journey nears its close, the tone becomes meditative. Every light in the sky, it whispers, is a story of patience, a message written in time, waiting for someone to notice. The cosmos, the voice suggests, is not indifferent. It listens back. The listener is reminded that the act of wonder itself is contact, that curiosity, imagination, and silence are the languages of the universe. The section ends with a sense of unity. Perhaps the real message, the narrator breathes, is that we were never separate at all. Every star that shines, every life that dreams, they are all part of the same infinite conversation. Silence settles in like dawn after a long night. The narrator's final words arrive softly, reverently. The journey is complete, but the story continues, for the universe never stops speaking. The voice recalls everything that has unfolded, the myths, the witnesses, the science, the secrets. It reminds the listener that truth and mystery are not opposites, but companions. Perhaps, the narrator says, the universe does not hide from us. It waits for us to be still enough to hear it. The background sound fades to near silence, only the faint rhythm of a heartbeat remaining. The narrator invites the listener to release all questions, all need for certainty. You are not apart from the cosmos, it whispers. You are the cosmos dreaming of itself. A soft melody begins, slow, luminous, almost human in tone. Every breath you take, the narrator continues, completes a story that began in the stars. Every heartbeat echoes the rhythm of galaxies. You are not observing the infinite, you are its expression. The voice lowers, barely audible now, like a final prayer. Sleep well, traveler. Let the stars keep their quiet watch. The universe dreams through you tonight. The last sound fades into stillness, leaving only peace, a silence so vast it feels alive.